Hey y'all, thank you for joining me on another video. Y'all, I look like Padu today. I do not feel well, but I really needed to do this video. I've been trying to do it for the past couple of days. I'd say close to a week now, but I kept backing out because it deals with a subject that's very, very tough. Um, as I think I've mentioned in a previous videos, I have a new addiction. It's called Heartland. Um, it takes place in Canada on a horse ranch and cattle ranch. They have cattle, and then they also take care of horses, gentle them, um, rescue them, that sort of thing. And I am a major horse person. So that's what attracted to me is. Well, I started watching from season 1, episode 1. It has 15 seasons, and I just finished season 14. Season 15 is on now, so because I don't have a subscription to where it's played um, live, I I haven't gotten that far yet. But in season 14, so this is a spoiler alert. If anybody is watching it now and on a previous season, or you're getting ready to watch it because it sounds good, this is a spoiler alert. So be warned. In the season, the very first episode of season 14, the main character, Amy, loses her husband. He's shot. He recovers from the shooting. He was shot by poachers. But due to complications afterwards, he ended up dying. Well, this whole season was about how the whole family is grieving and coming to terms with Ty's death, which I thought was wonderful because you don't see that. Usually you see character dies, 2 episodes later, the one who's left behind is already dating. So I really loved how they went through the grieving process with each character. And since this was the 14th season and I've watched all the others, you get to know the characters, and they used all the same people throughout the seasons, so you get to feel like you know them. And after the funeral and everything, um, Amy is taking care of a horse, and she's trying to figure out what's wrong with the horse. And the first thought I had was, well, she can have Ty, who was a veterinarian, check him out. And then it dawned on me, wait, no, can't, because he's dead. And then it's like came up at once. She's grieving something that was real. She's grieving the death of her husband. They had a great marriage. They had a little girl. You know, everything was great. And she's grieving that. What I'm grieving never existed. And it started to hit me. How do you grieve something that in your mind existed, but in reality it didn't? I fell in love with a man that was sweet, caring, gentle, um, appeared to worship the ground I walked on. But what I ended up with was a mean, hateful abuser, self-centered abuser. And dealing with that has been, my brain is going in all kinds of directions. Because think about it. When you're grieving a loved one's death, that person was real. And like if it was in the case of a marriage, that marriage was real. They loved you, and everything that wraps around a marriage. But when you're grieving, like in my case, a marriage that never truly existed, that's a whole different dynamic. Because what you thought you married, whom you thought you married, you didn't. Because what I saw in the end, all of that abusiveness, that was real. That was his legitimate self. What I thought I married was a mask. Basically, I was married to a mask. Because when we were first married, my younger brother was 17. And he would come over a couple of times on a Friday or Saturday night to visit, and he was with his friends. And I didn't have a problem with that because at least I knew where he was and that he was safe. Well, he had a friend, as typical teenagers, had cussing like a sailor. I think he would make a sailor blush, saying F-bombs and cuss words left and right. And my ex had talked to the friend about cussing in front of me, saying you don't cuss in front of my wife. And that was like, I never expected that, but that was like, made my heart sore, because it's like, oh, he's that chivalristic. And the kid one time said the F word, and my ex threatened to pummel him if he didn't stop cussing in front of me. And he wasn't even cussing me, he was just cussing. And he threatened to pummel a 17-year-old. And that just, for decades I held on to that. Because that made my heart sore. Because it was like, sore as in fly. Because it was like, wow, he cares for me so much that he won't let a kid cuss in front of me. Again, not cussing at me or cussing me out, but just cussing in front of me. And I held on to that memory for years and years and years. And that's part of why I stayed for so long. Because I guess it's part of the cognitive dissonance where he's acting this way now, abusive or whatever. But look how he did act. Where he was so chivalristic that he almost pummeled a 17-year-old because he was cussing in front of me. And it hurts just to think about it now. Because that's who I thought I was marrying. I thought I was marrying a man that was what you see is what you get. No frills, I thought that's what I was marrying. and I didn't realize that he had the best mask on. And what hurts worse is that I know it wasn't because somewhere deep in the back of his brain that he had some sort of liking for me or love for me. It was simply because I was a means to an end. I was a way for him to be able to move out of his mother's home and into his own place. Because even back then, living in New Orleans, unless you made equivalent of $15, $20 an hour, today's standards, it was hard to live on your own, unless you had a one-room studio apartment. And also, he really wasn't working well-paying jobs because he didn't even have a GED and he wasn't even trying. But, again, I didn't see all of that because I was swooning over him being so chivalrous. He was so chivalrous, and that's what I had wanted. No, not necessarily someone to do everything for me, but just to treat me like the queen that I so desperately wanted to be treated like. Treat me like I was worth loving, like I was worth protecting. Because as I've stated, I was never protected by my father, my biological father, not really. And to go from having a biological father that never protected me to an individual that was pretty much overprotective. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. I realize now that he wasn't overprotective. It was a form of control, because he always had to be in control. He had to be in control of everything, and that included my life, because heaven forbid I get so independent that I don't need him anymore. And that's what I'm grieving. What I thought I had. And yeah, I've talked about in a previous video how that revelation came to me a good while back, that he never really loved me. But I think it's starting to settle in, and I guess that series from Heartland kind of triggered it, because it was like, you know, that character is grieving something that was real. The husband she loved was the husband that she was married to. The husband I loved was anything but the husband I had truly married. Where he convinced me that he was sweet and wonderful, he was mean and abusive. And like I mentioned previously, I held on. There was good memories, but they were fake. I mean, they were real, they really happened, but the motivation was fake. Like with dang near pummeling a 17-year-old just for cussing in front of me. or being very careful and helping me walk downstairs when my knees would be weak because I have arthritis in my knees, or waking up to coffee in bed, because he did that for the longest time, where no matter how bad of a fight we got into the night before, I'd wake up in the morning to coffee. And I would wake up to him waking me up, saying, honey, time to wake up, I got your coffee. And it would be all ready. All I had to do was sit up in bed and drink it. And it was little things like that that held me on, or made me hold on. Because I'm thinking, well, he can't be that bad if he's doing things like that. Maybe it is me. I mean, my head was so messed up and so confused, I didn't know what end was up. Because I would see what he was doing to me and know that it was wrong. It took the longest time to realize that it was abuse. And it took me getting out of it to see how horrible of abuse it was. But, when I would think, okay, I don't need to live like this, then instantly my mind would go to things like coffee in bed. Or I'd come home from work being on my feet for 6-8 hours at a fast food place, come home to a candlelight dinner with a nice meal, not just a sandwich or, some little burgers and fries, but a nice meal and candlelight dinner with our song playing in the background. And I know now that all of that was by design. Because in looking back now with clear glasses, so to speak, as near as I can tell, every time we would get into a horrible fight, he would do something like that. The coffee in bed, or the meal, or he'd randomly come up to me and sing to me. Because he was talented, he did have a very good bass voice. And, I would just swoon when he would sing to me. And that SOB knew that. And he knew doing little things like that, which I now know is called breadcrumbing, because they throw you a few little breadcrumbs to make you happy and think, okay, well, it's not so bad. Because you're so used to being treated horribly that when they do something nice, it's like, oh my goodness. And it's all by design. He would do that to manipulate me. And in case I was thinking about leaving, it would get me to change my mind. That's why he did it, because he knew my mind. I mean, you don't live 32 years with someone without knowing them. And narcissists study their victims even more so. They get in your brain and they know your deepest desires, your loves, your goals. And he knew what I truly wanted. And he portrayed that, which got me to fall head over heels for him. And then by the time I realized that this is not something I need to be in, I didn't know what to do. And now, going through this process of grieving something that never existed, talk about the height of cognitive dissonance, because you see what they did, the nice things they did, or the good times that you had. But then you know that it's all a ruse, that it's all fake. And then you get to the point where you realize every part of your relationship was fake. How do you explain that to somebody? Unless they've gone through it too. You know, they say, grieve the marriage. What marriage? What I had with him was fake from day one. I mean, I remember mentioning in a previous video how he acted like he cared when I would go have flashbacks and stuff with the rape, or because of the rape. And yet, after we got married, he got aggravated that it was inconveniencing him and cornered me into calling the rape crisis center, or the rape crisis line rather, which he didn't know he was actually doing me a favor, or he didn't care. He was just not wanting to be inconvenienced anymore. And I remember thinking, you know, him cornering me into calling the rape crisis line, thinking, I better do something because he's starting to get aggravated. Now, the Penny I am now, I would have said, yo, if you're getting aggravated because you can't handle my baggage, there's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out. But back then, I was so craving male acceptance, because I never got male acceptance from my biological father. And the only male acceptance I ever got dealt with wanting to get me in bed. So here it appeared that I was getting accepted for who I am. A man who did love me, or so I thought. You know, I'm going to do this for him. I'm going to heal. But from day one, when we were talking on the phone, and he would be there for me and listen to me sobbing because I just had a flashback or a horrible nightmare, it was all fake. Just to hook me. And I also know now that he only married me to keep me. Because at the time he and I were talking, my mom had gotten a better job outside of Chicago. So we had moved to Chicago, and the original plan was that I was going to get a job, save up money, move back down to New Orleans, and he and I move in together. And here's what hooked me beyond, you know, any doubt. We were still talking when we started talking about me moving back down to New Orleans and moving in together. And I wanted to see how he felt about me because I wasn't sure. mainly I was scared. I didn't want to assume he liked me if he didn't. So I asked him, when we move into a place, will it be a 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom? And he said, well, I know because of the rape, you're probably not going to do anything at the time. So it'll be 2 bedroom until you're ready to come in my room. Y'all, he could not have been smoother. That's when my heart just went, ugh, and that was it. In fact, I remember telling my sister, and my sister's like, does he have a brother? Because it's like, oh my gosh, this is what every woman wants to hear, that a man respects her like this and cares about her. And when he said that, I was hooked. I was hooked, you know, beyond ending it. I was hooked beyond repair. When he said that, it was like, that's it. I'm done. I'm cooked. And it was all by design. And then when we got to Chicago, I had never been to Chicago in my life. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I should give Chicago a try and see how I do, So I told him that. And he told me something that in retrospect, I realized what he really meant by it. He told me that night he talked with a mutual friend, the one that had introduced us, and said, what am I going to do? I feel like I'm never going to see her again. I need her. And it was the next day that he proposed to me. What I realize now is that, yeah, he needed me. He was afraid I would never come back down to New Orleans, and so therefore he would never be able to move out. I was his ticket out of the home. Y'all, I'm sure y'all can empathize with how that hurts, but unless you've dealt with it, it's hard to understand, because the person you were in a relationship with is nothing like the person that they portray. They portray someone totally different than what they really are. And they know what to portray in order to get to you, because they pay attention. So just trying to grieve what no longer exists, or what never existed. That is a whole different type of grieving and sorrow. Y'all have a good week. Stay blessed and have a happy Thanksgiving.